Hello, listeners, and welcome to this third and final part of Freedom Fire Ministries and Eva's Eden miniseries. Access to ad-free early content. You can find me at patreon.com/the Cult Vault, where you can support the show from as little as £1 a month. But for now, here is Desi. At some point in the timeline of the Oneness Foundation, there's a significant event that happens that sparks the launch of a new branch of the Oneness Foundation. And I just wondered if you could talk the listeners through that whole saga.
So everybody had pets, and they had started doing some volunteering, because for a while we were expected to do classes, and it was usually classes taught by other people in the congregation, but everybody had to do something. And so some of that people would go and work at soup kitchens and animal shelters. And the pastor got a cat from one of the animal shelters, and her name was Eva. And then she died, and it threw Cheryl into a tailspin. And she immediately she decided, but of course God decided, right? That they were going to start a cat adoption agency, and they were going to call it Eva's Eden. And very quickly, it was brought to light, quote unquote, that cats were divine beings, that the Egyptians were right to worship cats. That's where the Bastet logo for the Eva's Eden comes from. There's a minute where I thought Eva was a Sphinx cat, and she wasn't. I think she was like a Russian blue or something. She was fluffy and gray, and okay. So it was definitely she was trying to incorporate the Egyptian mythology more than actually immortalize her cat. And then of course worked in that we're the chosen people, and so the cats are going to transform and ferry the souls of the 144,000 in the end times. And so with that, they started the agency and had it in the basement of the Masonic temple. And everybody in the congregation was expected to foster these cats. And they were saving cats by the truckload from places like the Pasco shelter down south here. They were targeting kill shelters. And yeah, but literally by the truckload. And there was the most people that went there at any one time, I think, was maybe 200. And I'm probably overestimating. And at one time, I know other people had upwards of 30, 40 cats. My parents, when they left, had 18.
Oh gosh, 18 cats. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Well, and some of those at one time or another, when I was right when we moved to that house when I was 12, 13, my dad brought home a cat. And ever since then, they kind of proliferated, because it's really hard to catch a cat after she's weaned the kittens, but before she goes in heat again. So we did have a good number that at some point or another were ours and not for the adoption agency. But a good number of them were for the adoption agency. And
So
actually,
you're living on a farm at this point. So you've
yeah,
mentioned in your writing to me that it wasn't sort of like a hoarder situation where there wasn't enough
yeah.
space or
Mm-hmm.
enough equipment to take
Right.
care of the cats correctly. And it's great that so many so many cats are being saved, so many kittens are being saved,
Hmm.
that kill shelters are being targeted. It's the
Yeah.
belief system
Yeah.
around the
Hmm.
reasoning for saving those cats
Right.
that's really quite strange, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and especially because like on top of those beliefs, like, and again, like it's great for the cats, but they were basically like the cats ate before anyone else in the house, like even the people's kids. Like most of the people in the congregation had young children, or at least like preteens and teenagers. Like I and a couple of the um pastor's kids were like the oldest people. Most people had like children, and like, but the cats had to eat first. And some of the congregation, I, I remember like we were never well off. We were never like poverty level. I mean, but like the middle class doesn't really exist. But we were like, if it did, we were like lower middle class. But like there were people that were in poverty, and not just that, but had like sick children that were allergic to cats and still were expected to have cats. Um, and like severely chastised if they weren't able to take care of them.
Would
Um,
Cheryl like introduce cats to like services and have them just sort of around? Because some of the things that I've read on the internet about this group is that you could go and visit, and people would say it was really strange because it was sort of like a public facing um a a public front face for the destructive group that was running in the background.
mhm.
Um, so it's interesting to hear how it came to be from your perspective, but I'm just wondering what may have made people recognize that it was just all a bit strange.
I think partly just like, especially if you went more than once, you kind of realize that this adoption agency was in the basement of church. Um, and I don't know, just kind of the the kind of attitude you would get from the people that, the congregation people that were working there and like helping you adopt, because like you they had like a screening process. It was really like not hard to adopt, but like they wanted it was under the guise of like making sure you were a good home, but it was really like sussing out. And I think it was supposed to be like for later on down the road, and then it just didn't end up happening in most cases. But like if you would be another good addition to the congregation. Um,
So it's
so
a quick way to find out people's financial status, I guess, if
that
they,
too. Yeah.
asking questions around like, can you financially support the adoption of this creature?
Yeah. Right.
And they're like, yeah, we make this much money.
Hmm.
And also personal contact details and things.
Yeah.
Wow. And the cat adoption agency, Eva's Eden, it's not in operation anymore.
No, so that was kind of their like screw up, at least like specifically like telling people like me that they were leaving behind, that the church disbanded and that the pastor moved to Scotland, was when they reestablished Eva's Eden over there. Because for one thing, it ended up that, we found out a lot of who moved over there, including that Cheryl Ruthven lives in Columbia, Tennessee with everybody else. Everybody else lives within like 50 miles of each other. But so they reestablished for a while, and then in 2016, when Rachel went on the Life After God podcast, and several people that started a Facebook page called Is There a Cult in Columbia, Tennessee, which are friends and family of people that are in it or that have gotten out. Um, they asked someone um, from a Nashville paper um, to do an article on them, and they they had been kind of saying similar things. I don't know if they ever got um, asked to comment on anything when they were over here. But I know that they'd been saying a lot of similar things up to different people about like, we're going to have to contact the FBI or lawyers or whatever. Um, and then literally the next day, everything was gone. All of their internet presence, um, and the cat adoption agency just didn't exist anymore. And so now the congregation is left with all of these cats that they're fostering. So, and like, my parents can't really explain it to me without telling me that the church still exists and like their whole belief system still exists, but they're still saving cats from the shelters with nowhere to put them, like nowhere to adopt them out. So my parents have like 35 or 40 cats now. And again, they live on another farm with a good amount of space, and some of the cats are indoor, outdoor, both, based on their like, how much care they need and stuff. But I mean, the whole house basically is devote. They have like, it started out they had a cat room, and now basically they have their room, and then the rest of the house is cats.
Oh my goodness. I don't even know how you could manage like a handful, let
Right.
alone a
It's
truckload.
hard enough for me
Oh
to have
my
two.
goodness.
Like,
The
especially
thing,
because
like,
one of them is so old and I have to give him meds every day and feed him a certain way at night. Like, I can't imagine.
there's so many cats. How do you, I just logistically, like, making sure that they are not all doubling, tripling, multiplying by the tenfold
Well, they
is a
that's a big
task on its
thing.
own.
That's a big thing on the front end. They're very big on making sure that everybody's fixed and chipped. So,
Cheryl's really dug herself into a hole with this part of the belief system, because even though the adoption agency doesn't exist anymore, the belief system around revering cats, keeping cats, saving cats, has really ended up with everybody having dozens and dozens and dozens of cats.
yeah,
And you actually have one of those cats.
I do. Yeah, it was pretty it was relatively soon after they started it. Um, I had just gotten back from Job Corps, and I moved into my first ever apartment on my own. And for my 21st birthday, they adopted one of the cats for me and gave me the cat. And it was one that they had already been fostering, and they specifically picked him because they kind of thought we would vibe.
This is
His name
your
is
parents.
Yeah. His name is Ferdinand. He's named after Ferdinand the Bull, because he's definitely I was gonna say gentle giant. He's not a giant by any means, especially he's so old, he's underweight now. Um, but he's always been kind of a loner, um, but just very sweet. Out of all of the cats that I've had, both another one here and then with different partners and stuff. And also a lot of the cats that they've had, he like he doesn't come and cuddle with me on my own, but he lets me pick him up. Um and and I kept the name. That was the name they gave him, and I was like, it's very fitting. So also it's kind of an old man name, and he's been an old man since I got him at 3 years old. So just very like, he's a tabby, and he meows a lot, but it sounds very like, get off my lawn.
And Ferdinand's going to be celebrating his 15th birthday on the week that this episode airs. So happy
Mhm.
birthday, Ferdinand.
Yeah.
So once you managed to break away from the group,
Mhm.
with maybe some help from the group moving to a different
Yeah.
part of the country, um, and you said that you began researching cults. What were your major sort of connections at that time, reading literature about destructive movements and realizing that you may have been part of one?
So I actually did that research way before I got out. I started doing that research when I started high school, when I was like 14, 15. And I didn't officially get out until I was 18. Um, and then even then, there was a couple times where I visited, um, and sort of like I can tell that they were trying to get me to come back. Um, and then yeah, officially when they left in 2013. But yeah, some of the things that I really noticed were the love bombing was one that I really connected with. Um, Also, like, just a lot of the control tactics that I could, really tell after the fact. Um, the fear and the intimidation, for instance, we were told that if we left or if we spoke out, specifically about Cheryl, about the prophet, or like said that she wasn't a real prophet or anything like that, um, we would go insane, or we would get cancer, or fall into financial ruin. Um, uh, some, and then the go to hell was, it always went back and forth. She talked about Sheol a lot, which is, an Old Testament word for hell. But like, looking back on it now, I don't so much think, especially towards the end, that they actually believed in like what some people are brought up with, the fire and brimstone type thing. Um, but again, things like, um well, for instance, what I did, because like I was at the behest of my parents, but like there are several times, both what I've talked about and others, where like I felt it upon myself that I would go and like tell her things, um, like basically like confession. Um, and there were times where I and other people did that, and she would have us say it like in front of people. Um, and just very much like, she wasn't a pastor in the sense of like other churches. It was very much like, especially looking back on it now, like she was the one we were worshiping. Um, and like her word, which of course, like we were told was God's word, was like the be all end all. Um, so including like the decisions she made, which again were because of God telling her stuff. So,
So the group still exists. It's functioning out of Tennessee currently, and the cats are still a big part of the more recent
mhm.
beliefs that have been introduced to the group. Um, your parents are still actively a part of the the movement, and
As is my sister.
right, okay. So really, you have been forced really to grow up much faster than you should have done. Really struggled pretty much alone through ill mental health, um, and all of the additional struggles that come with not having the correct support around a diagnosis or
Hmm.
management of ill mental health.
Hmm.
So there's a level of resilience there that you've had to create. Um,
Hmm.
I used to work with young carers who care 6 to 18-year-olds that care for somebody else in the home.
Hmm.
And people always used to say, wow, aren't those kids so resilient? Like it was a good thing. Of course,
Hmm.
it's great to be resilient
Yeah.
if you have to be, but kids shouldn't
Hmm.
have to be
Right.
resilient in the first place. They shouldn't have to be put in a position where they have to become resilient in order to manage their lives, in order to survive and thrive. So
Yeah.
you've really been placed in a position where you finish school early, you're taking extra classes, you're excelling at things that you do despite all of these extra added difficulties that you have. Your parents then up and leave, even though you've basically lived without them for your whole teenage life onwards anyway. And now you are living with Ferdinand and your other cat. Um, I just think that's an astonishing journey that you've been able to kind of almost compartmentalize everything in order to make sure that you can take care of yourself, which of course you never should have had to do.
Yeah. There were a lot of ups and downs between then and now too. I When they left, was kind of the catalyst for me finding out that I was bipolar, um, because I'd kind of already been going manic before then, but that was kind of the the um, the kickstart to the main thing, because not knowing that I was, we didn't know what to look for. And I'd also just switched to a new therapist and a new psychiatrist because of them leaving. I was losing insurance and stuff. And so I ended up having a psychotic break and having legal issues and stuff like that. And also during that time that because my overall thing lasted for almost a year. It lasted between 9 and 10 months. Um, and during that time, I alienated a lot of my neighbors to the point where I um, had a lease violation and lost my apartment. And then I ended up homeless for 4 years.
Oh my goodness.
Um, and So I was in shelters for most of that time. And then I was able to get on public housing. And right before I got in public housing is when I finally got into recovery. I do a couple of different 12-step programs. I'm not just bisexual, I'm bisexual. Um, but and I started going back to school. I actually started going back to school while I was in some of the shelters, and I got a degree from the local technical college. And then I started going back to school for my psychology degree in like 2018, I believe. And yeah, I things have, you know, been off and on, kind of good and bad, but good for the most part, especially since I've been able to, you know, get my feet under me. Getting sober was a big thing. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I would not have in my life if I hadn't gotten sober. I refound my spirituality, which is still really ever evolving. It's kind of funny, speaking of all of her eclectic pick and choose,
I was thinking this
I
earlier.
kind of do the same thing. But I also practice and it harm none, do what you will, which includes like not, screwing with people's minds.
Well, I
Um,
mean, do you have like a building where you gather people together and
I
put
don't.
put, put
I do
those
stuff by
beliefs onto
myself.
others? Yeah,
So
I think, I mean, I did have that thought earlier about the different, and I think that that's okay.
yeah,
It's your, it's your individual right
right.
to
Yeah,
explore and express. Of course, it's when it starts to be put onto others in a coercive
hmm,
manner that it's
yeah,
not okay. So that's great. And I was also going to
yeah.
ask, what star sign do you think I am?
Ooh, I want to. At the very least, I think you're either an air or an earth sign.
I
Um,
don't even know what my star sign is, like element
so
wise.
there's four elements, right? So like there's three for each element. So of those, you would either be a
Oh, I do know. I think I do know.
yeah,
Um, I'm
but
an Aries.
no way.
Yeah, but I do think that my podcast self and me as
Okay.
Casey are
Yeah.
two very different people. So yeah.
And
Um
I'm a big proponent of the big three is a much better picture of a person. So big three being the sun, the moon, and the rising. Um, because I've talked to a lot of people that don't necessarily vibe with their sun sign is like fully, but when you talk about um your sun sign being your base personality, your moon sign being how you see yourself and like your inner emotional state, and then your rising sign being like what you present to other people, and like kind of the mask that you wear in the world and like how other people see you, that gives a lot more of a fuller picture in my opinion, because I'm a Sagittarius sun, and one of the main things that I've never really vibed with is like that's the like, you know, free spirit, travel all over the place, which like that'd be nice, but like also I just I don't know. It's hard for me to I want to get out of here at some point, but like I don't know. And so
stability and
yeah,
routine are very important,
and
aren't
that's I
they?
mean that's just a very important thing, just yeah. And because also like star signs, they're great, but like then life experience, really informs a lot of how you live in the world. Um, because I also, I practice divination and stuff like that, but none of those things are set in stone ever. And you can like, well, this is what would either happen if you go on this trajectory. So then you could make these other decisions that won't let that happen. Or it's like, here's different options, you know. And so in the same way, yeah. So Sagittarius sun, Aries moon, Virgo rising. And so like, and when I tell people that, like, I'm very, because those are, and two fire and a earth. And so like I'm a very like I'm an extroverted, like very passionate person, but also like and up until more recently when I got some of my more visible tattoos and piercings, people, they can see that I put off like I'm pretty put together. And that's definitely an earth quality and a Virgo quality. And I definitely have the like, I like making lists and I like having everything in my calendar and stuff like that. Um, but when it really comes down to it, like, you know, if and it's more for like with my friends. If someone messes with my friends, you better watch out. So
There comes the fieriness, I
yeah.
suppose. So a really a really tumultuous journey through adolescence into adulthood.
Hmm.
Um and you are in a pretty incredible place right now. But it's been a very long journey to get to that point. I think it's amazing that you are 5, 6 years in recovery.
A little over 6. With
Wow,
a
that's
I had a small blip when my parents told me they weren't coming. Um, but what I've told everybody else that I've ever met in recovery that's had relapses, I didn't lose all the stuff that I learned and all of the progress that I've made in my life by slipping up.
yeah. And that's the
And
importance of terminology, isn't it? Because you might
yeah.
hear somebody say that they're X years sober, but
Hmm.
um I think people will always be in recovery.
Yeah.
It's the same as individuals who are deconstructing their cultic experiences
Hmm.
and attempting recovery from trauma and abuse.
Yeah.
It's not something that has there's no end point to that. So
Yeah.
recovery is something that is a continuous
Hmm.
thing. So six
So
years
in
is
in continuous time, I have a little over 6 months. But being in recovery, I've been in recovery for 6 years. So
well, that brings us to the end of our conversation today. I just wanted to ask you if you have any advice that you would like to give to people who are also in dual recovery in the same way you are, recovering from addiction, but also recovering from abuse or trauma that they may have experienced in a cultic environment.
yeah, if anyone's able, like therapy saved my life, but I also recognize that that's not always possible either, you know, the biggest one, especially like here in the United States of, insurance and all that stuff. Also like depending on other life situations, it might not be safe if they're still either in that situation or a lot of us have a tendency, even if we're not in that environment, to seek out abusive people. Um, and even now, like I'm still realizing stuff about myself. I've um, more recently come to the realization that even though I got out of that and have done a lot of therapy and also am in recovery from drugs and alcohol, I gave that stuff up for people. So it's an ever going process. But I think just some other advice I would give, maybe not even advice, but just like the affirmation that it's not their fault. Um, Even if they were, adults that, found themselves in those situations and environments, like people preyed upon us, you know, um, and, in the same way of like any other kind of abuse or assault. Like, that is not your fault. And, you know, there's so many people like me and everyone else that's been on this podcast and all kinds of groups on Facebook and Reddit. Reddit is awesome. um, and, you know, there's so much support out there, even regardless of therapy, you know. Um, but I'm not a toxically positive person by any means. I'm definitely more of an optimist. Um, and so like things do eventually get better. Oh, no, I take that back. And it's a line that you hear in 12-step groups a lot. Um, that things may not necessarily get better, but they're gonna get different. Um, and healing is not linear. Um, you know, I mean, even just recently, I had bariatric surgery a little over a year ago. And because of that, I've had to alter so many meds and supplements and stuff. And I actually have had some like mental health episodes that haven't happened since the stuff in 2013. Um, And so it's been really interesting navigating that. Because then also in 2013, I wasn't sober and I wasn't on the right meds and stuff. So being in a different place has been really helpful. And I wouldn't be able to do that um, without all the support that I found through those groups, through the 12-step programs, my friends. And I'm an extrovert, so I do karaoke at least twice a week. So
Do you have a karaoke song?
right now, it's been Give Me One Reason by Tracy Chapman or Slide by the Goo Goo Dolls.
I absolutely love Tracy Chapman. That's an awesome choice. I think that there are a couple of notable songs that people might choose before that one as well. So that's a really and when it comes to like activism and like empowering women, it's just Tracy Chapman's amazing. So yeah, big shout out to you, Tracy.
If they had more Ani DeFranco songs, most people only have like one. It's a good one.
It's a good one, but we could do with more. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know it's the middle of the night for you, and I am so appreciative of your openness, your willingness to come in and share your experiences and talk about everything from the difficult family circumstances through to your journey of understanding your own diagnosis, and also everything that Cheryl has um, put into the world. Um, I think that this episode is not being linear in the way
Mhm.
that some episodes might unfold, but think that that's I think that just makes this a standalone conversation even more so. So
Yeah.
I am really, really thankful that we're able to have this conversation today, because in terms of divination, had any of your decisions been different, we might not be having this chat. So I'm really, really
Mhm.
thankful for that, and thankful to meet Ferdinand as well,
Yeah.
and think that there's a lot of inspiration to be taken from your story of strength, and I I really look forward to the listeners being able to hear it. So thank you so much, Desi. And thank you for being a patron of the show as well. Your continued
Absolutely.
support of the podcast is, don't even have the words to thank patrons ever. I'm just like, what can I say here? And it's just thank you, thank you, thank you. So I appreciate you and your time, and I will let you go and get some sleep.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to meet you.
Take care, Desi. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of this mini-series on Freedom Fire Ministries and Eva's Eden. To get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault Podcast.